You're listening to America's Web Radio on the AmericasBroadcastNetwork.com. Thank you for listening.
Good morning and welcome to the Business Hour. I'm Ron Comacho, your host. And today's business at hand is the business of high fidelity, high definition, high-end audio, and visual to some extent, hardware and systems. And along with the area of consumer electronics, which is ever-changing, we'll be talking to my guest about what it takes to operate a high-end store with new components that are from some of the highest-end manufacturers, how sound reproduction has changed over the last few decades, and simply what it takes to evolve in a field which has, by and large, changed quite a bit. There aren't any strictly dedicated to high-fidelity sound businesses, not many across the country, but I'm pleased to have as my guest Alan Jones, the owner of Hifi Buys, based here in Atlanta, in Buckhead, which is kind of north central metro Atlanta. Welcome to the Business Hour, Alan.
Thanks for having me, Ron. I'm happy to be here.
Alan, we talked about it being a high-end industry, and I think we'll get into some of the demographics, but maybe first we'll talk a little bit about the history, because there are people who know that Hifi Buys, at least as a name, and a business which was dedicated to audio products and some visual products, but primarily audio, goes back 40 some years.
Back to 1973, I believe it is.
Okay, that's 50,
or maybe 77,
maybe 60 years. Yeah, that's a lot of years.
It is.
Tell us a little bit about the evolution. I think a lot of listeners out there who are fascinated by entrepreneurialism, if you will, who started a business, how that business evolved, how your current guest ended up with the business, which is actually a little bit different in that you didn't buy the physical facility so much with equipment. You bought a brand that you cultivated into a better brand. Tell us a little bit about from Mel Silverman to the Alan Jones Hifi Buys.
Okay. Actually, Mel Silverman was the one that founded the store. And again, I try not to get too detailed in the history of it and that kind of thing, but Mel founded it and at one point sold it to Jeffrey Snow. And Jeffrey Snow was instrumental in really making the brand what it is today. He's deserves an awful lot of credit for where he went with it. And you end up finding they turned it into, from what I remember, is a 13-store, close to $100 million chain. They were real movers in the industry when they went out after Tweeter bought them in, I think, 2000. I'm not something earlier in the 2000s. And anyway, they bought them then and kind of changed the culture of the brand. They were a very educational brand. They had very knowledgeable people and that kind of thing. And that's what the brand was built on and how they went places. And they changed that and kind of started hiring clerks and that kind of thing and thought that they could do business down here as they did in the north, and they couldn't. And that kind of got proved itself. And so in late 2007, early 2008 was when they kind of went down, along with a lot of other things around our country and or I should say around the world, really. And so tough times, but that's when they basically went out. They sold all the assets to a clearinghouse after the bankruptcy. And so in 2013, after spending a considerable amount of time calling the particular number of the clearinghouse, a lady picks up and says, "I can help you." And so what I did is I bought the .com and then trademarked the .com for the brand so that I could have some protection within this state on that. And 2 years later, opened a store in Buckhead.
And was that the beginning of the operation? Did you ever operate virtually? Did you ever have an online business?
No online business. I did have a website before, which was a very unique website. We have a website.com. The name of the store was called Audio Alternative, but we had been asked so many times early in the .com era was, "Do you have a website?" And so we came up with, "Yes, we have a website.com." And then it'd be like, "Well, what is your website?" And we go, "Yes, we have a website.com." And well, what is your website? It was kind of pretty funny stuff, but anyway, so I had a store actually open in March of 1995, and shut down that store in the very end of May 2015 and opened up Hifi Buys in Buckhead. So changed my name and locations within about a 10-day period. Obviously, there was a lot more work than that involved. But so during that 10-day period, an amazing crew of people that still work for me, and a lot of folks around that, and a lot of vendors, manufacturers, and that kind of thing all contributed to us getting that move done. It was we had a fully operating store, and then 10 days later we had a fully operating store in a different location. And that's when you come into the store and see the amount of stuff that must move to make that happen. It was for me, it's one of the greatest things I've ever led, and
pretty delicate stuff to move.
It can be. Once you get it in the box, it's not too bad, but getting it there and back out is is something. I mean, we have a single shelving system for basically one of the main systems in the store that's back in the back of the store, and that probably it weighs 1,500 pounds maybe, and so it is an awful lot of weight just to move a stand. That's not even any gear or any wiring or anything along that line. So there were several tons of product moved.
So you're wrapping things up in one store and boxing things you're wiring the other store probably.
Well, we boxed it all up in a couple of days and then moved it all the next day, and then all of us went down and unboxed. And it was an amazing crew down there working 10, 12, 14-hour days. And I didn't hear a complaint from anybody. There may have been some, but I didn't hear them. So but it was a great time and a wonderful thing. And then we did our grand opening, and actually had Mill Silverman there. Would have loved to have had Jeffrey Snow there, but him and also Sam Massell, who was the governor of Atlanta. So at the time when Hifi Buys was open, and so anyway, we're really happy to have them there for our ribbon cutting, and kind of a really, quite a celebration that day.
I bet you Mel was really pleased to see this new iteration of his brainchild.
Yes. I mean, listen, he and I have, again, we've been friends for 15 years, and he's actually bought from me for, I guess, that about the same amount of time. And his dear wife, Sally, she is just awesome. Those guys have been great as mentors and people that, I can bounce things off of where they've kind of been in that world. And it's wonderful to have people like that around me.
Well, we should give a tip of the hat to Mel Silverman, because he would have been the guy. I mean, there was Dirty Dons and Meltons and
High Fidelity SSS.
High Fidelity SSS
Kramer,
and Stereo Designs and then the CMC stores. But I think his efforts were the ones that put High Fidelity, if you will, on the map here in Atlanta.
Well, as far as Hifi Buys, I mean, Mel opened it, but Jeffrey Snow was the one that really pushed it forward and really made it into the, shall we say, very sizable company that it was.
Well, then we have to give a tip of the hat to Jeffrey Snow
as well. Yes. If
we were standing around with a couple of beers in our hand or another adult beverage somewhere, this is a little game I play. We're not in an elevator, so you have more time than giving an elevator speech. But and you're probably faced with a situation every now and then. You're talking to somebody who could become a customer, because when they ask you to characterize what Hifi Buy does, what you sell, you have a clear sense. Well, this guy could be a high-end audio aficionado guy, and you give him a little more than a 60-second elevator speech. What do you say, Ellen, when you describe what the store sells?
That's a really interesting question, and it's kind of different for everybody. I'll kind of go backwards a little bit and then come forward. But, the beautiful thing about it is that everybody loves music. It's just we all tie ourselves to it in different ways. And so I kind of, I guess the first thing is come in for an experience, leave your wallet at home, just come in and enjoy yourself, because in reality, we don't find many of those environments out there where we can just go in and just enjoy ourselves. And so, our tagline is Hifi Buys, get the experience. And it's really about coming and having an experience at our store that is unlike any experience you'll have at any store anywhere. And if you look at the reviews of the store, you'll see that's true. And I can't think of a time when I told someone about the store, and I'll say this to somebody in this thing, I can't think of a time when I've told someone to come into the store and their expectations were not just well superseded, in the sense of I had no idea. Most of us love music and have been kind of touched by it, but don't really realize how great it really can be. and what Fidelity really is. We think it's limited by what we've heard because we think we've been exposed to it all. And what our store does is really take people and exposing them to something much greater than they realized was out there.
You and I had a conversation off here about how the cell phone has put us in this mode of moving sometimes too fast, of instant communications, and right. The effect that has on other aspects of our life. And we oftentimes don't take time to sit and enjoy something like music, just like we don't sometimes sit and enjoy a great tasting food. And in fact, because we're constantly referring to our cell phones, which have those little bitty reproduction devices for sound, and listening to a myriad of other sound sources, there's no high fidelity from most of those, the vast majority of those sources. So it's got to be literally or figuratively like a breath of fresh air for someone to come in, relax, and have an audio experience in your store.
I think that's true. I think this wonderful little device called the phone, which I use quite often. But the thing I would end up saying about it is that it is, it's kind of the one thing that kind of keeps us in constant motion is, we got to be on that phone, got to respond to it, got to do that. And we really don't get a lot of places to have peace in our life. And music can really be one of those. And quite honestly, we can use that phone to help us get there because there are ways to make a phone sound great. What we generally know is that streaming out there is that, a huge portion of the population is streaming, but very few people do it correctly. So they don't really know that there is a whole nother level of fidelity available to them using the same devices, not really changing their world much at all, and not spending a lot of money to get something that is at a whole nother place. I had an experience recently where somebody that I knew was basically listening to their computer or their iPhone for music, and they just bought a simple little speaker from me and took it home, and what a change of life, as opposed to this thin kind of teeny little sounding phone or computer. Now you had something that had, more richness and fidelity and that kind of thing to it. And you don't realize how you miss it because we're so used to the norm of just the phone or the computer, and let's just use those speakers, they're built in, we don't need anything anymore. But if you go beyond that just slightly, you'll be amazed how much better the experience can be.
And all coming from that phone.
Still can.
Which is, so in a sense, your sound source for not necessarily amplification, but at least, as you say, if you've got a good musical source at the broadcast end or the originating end of it, you can get a good sound. And yes, we're going to talk a little bit more about that because we're going to talk about headphones in a bit. And we're going to talk about the other half of what you explain to someone when they say, well, what do you have in the store? We're here with Alan Jones of Hifi Buys. We're talking high fidelity and the business of selling high-end sound equipment. We'll be back right after this break.
Get your pen and paper ready. If there's a move in your near future, I'm here to tell you that the folks I used and now recommend is Around Town Movers. Timothy and the guys recently moved me, and I am and was totally satisfied with a sometimes not so fun experience moving. Call Timothy at 770-378-4708 and make it a good move and a good experience. Around Town Movers for that local or cross-country move. Timothy, Around Town Movers, in my opinion, are the best. That's Around Town Movers. Call them.
Whether cruising the strip in a 57 Chevy or taking the family on a vacation in a 71 Oldsmobile Vista Cruiser, you need to tune in to Classic Cars with Steve Ronaldo and Jim Weber every Saturday from 8 to 9 a.m. on americaswebradio.com.
Perhaps you are struggling to cope with the disease of addiction. If not, you probably know a family member or friend that needs help in battling the cravings and the personal and professional damage done by the effects of drugs. Get a pen and paper and be ready to write down the following. These are the issues that the trained staff at the Atlanta Healing Center address and treat every day. Their doctors and counselors with over 40 years of practice in the field of addiction can treat the suffering individual in a thoughtful, compassionate, and experienced manner and guide him or her along the path to recovery. So call 770-696-9862 and speak to a knowledgeable staff member about how you or your loved one can be helped to enjoy a better and healthier life. More information is also available on the website at www.atlantahealingcenter.com.
You're listening to America's Web Radio on the AmericasBroadcastNetwork.com. Thank you for listening.
Welcome back to the Business Hour. We're here with Alan Jones, the owner of Hifi Buys, a high fidelity sound system with some audio, some visual systems as well, because we're going to be touching upon home entertainment centers in a bit, home media centers. But Alan was talking a little bit about, we touched on the telephone, and the telephone has changed us in many ways. One of the conveniences or additional dimensions of control we might have with a phone, and you mentioned this during the break, was the phone doesn't have to be the source for the audio. The phone can be controlling other audio systems. Talk to us a little bit about how many customers you get that want to be able to use their iPads or their phones or some other remote device with some pretty sophisticated sound systems, and how you help them navigate what is probably a jungle of options.
Mm, there is a lot of different ways to do things. Obviously, I have my feelings on what is right. I've been doing this for 35 years, and I think one of the things that I've learned over the time, and I fought streaming and going digital and storing things and all that kind of things. I wanted the media. I mean, I still play vinyl, and I love collecting vinyl, and I still do today. But I also listen to digital, so it's kind of like tubes and solid state and digital versus analog. I'm not at war of one over another. I think they all have their abilities and assets and positive things to go around this. And I think that, what people are wanting to do today is that we work so much time on our computers that in reality, when we get home, we kind of want to get away. And so if we can get it to where we're on an iPad or something that's different than what we use in our everyday life, iPad, iPhone, whatever, if we're using our phones a lot, I've had people say, I want to get away from my phone, and they want an iPad to control the music so they can put their phone aside. So there are many different ways to look at it, but these things can operate as remote controls for very high-end systems, for a simple little, box by Sonos or Blue Sound or that kind of thing. One of the biggest steps that I ever made, and what actually made digital music or streaming music just so much greater for me, was the ability is when I got my phone and I get all the artwork and I get all the songs, and I can search for anybody in the world through Tidal or Qobuz. Those are two of the kind of higher res, or I should say full res and above streaming sources. They cost about $20-25 a month. You can put them on your phone, you can put them in your home, you can do all those things, and you end up having, between both of them, you have about 60 million songs available to you, which is more than anybody will ever learn or be able to listen to in their lives. But at the same time, it's all there. You can listen to them as many times as you want, and yet your phone just tells another device what to go out to the internet and grab and come down and play. Or your phone, if you're listening to headphones or something on your iPhone, what you end up finding is that you can then tell it to go out to the internet and grab whatever it wants and play it directly into the headphones that you're wearing. So you can have something that's very good fidelity, that's portable, carry it with you, or have something all the way up to some of our top end systems at $400,000 or $500,000 that you could actually control with your.
And tell us a little bit about the peripherals or the interconnectivity between that phone or that iPad and that more elaborate sound system. Is there the equivalent of a single piece of hardware that makes that connection, or is some of the hardware got the built-in Bluetooth or whatever it is that's connecting the iPad?
Well, this is where we get into the myriad of ways and things and that kind of thing. First of all, Bluetooth is great. It is very easy to use, very great when you have a friend over to the house and they want to play a song or something along that lines. But you end up finding it is not the best of fidelity. Okay, so even though it is convenient, it has its place in our world, and we embrace it at the store. I think one of the things that you'll find is that if we can, it does have compression in it. It's kind of like Pandora has compression in it, Spotify has compression, that kind of thing. So you will find that if we can get away from the compression, we will find ourselves with more fidelity. And with more fidelity becomes a more relaxing sound and something that's easier to embrace and something you'll want to spend more time with, simply because of how much easier it sounds on your ears. I think that's kind of what's missed today, is this is what music is and it doesn't get any better, and that's just simply not true. And that's what we really invite people to the store to do, is to have that experience. If it's for you, that's wonderful. If it's not, that's wonderful too. So it's really kind of up to the individual as to how far they want to take things.
I like the phrase "get away from the compression."
Yes,
yeah.
I mean, it is music can be such an amazing, relaxing experience at levels that most of us cannot even understand. And until you actually have that experience, which I invite anybody to come and do, it's just, I have people that actually have come into the store. Then the youngster, 20-year-old guy, his parents come to town and he brings them into the store for them to have that experience, because he is so taken by it. And we sit there and think that young people, well, they don't know how to listen. They don't know what they're doing. Well, that's just not true. And it's like saying that women don't listen to music and they're not in hi-fi. That's so not true. And we tend to beat our business down saying that, they can't do this, they're not doing this, nobody's doing this. From generation to generation to generation, every single parent has told their kids, you don't know what you're doing listening to music. And it's been that way forever. I bet way back in the caveman, they were sitting there drumming going, those kids don't know what they're drumming now.
That's right. Turn that blank down.
Yes.
To borrow a phrase, they had not just struck the right chord. I mean,
literally.
And so let's go back. Now you piqued my interest, because you're saying, if you get a chance, come into my store, get the experience of sound unlike you perhaps never have heard.
Almost assuredly.
Yes. And it would have to be someone going in who's been in your store or been in a similar environment, of which there are few around the country and around the world. I might add, we're talking about little Hifi Buys in Buckhead, Atlanta, but you're one of the few places in the world, honestly speaking, where you're going to get this kind of experience. People still probably want to know, well, what do you carry? And they may be conjuring up old images of turntables and speakers,
yes,
which you do have,
of course,
on a level that would far supersede what they previously, unless they had some pretty high-end components themselves, which many of your customers will have gone through a period where they had high-end components, then sound took a back seat to life, and now they're getting back into sound and sound systems. How do you describe what you carry? And you can even name names of some of the manufacturers, because you carry some of the Ferrari and Lamborghinis of the sound industry.
We do, but without allowing this to be too intimidating to some. We start pretty much with streaming speakers from basically about $150 and go on up. Our largest system in the store that is a 2-channel stereo system with a turntable and a streamer and that kind of thing in it.
I needed a couple of basic speakers a few weeks back. I went in and got some great little poke speakers from you.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, you can come in for some basic quality. items.
And one thing, you'll walk in our store, all the speaker prices are priced per pair, so you get two for that. I never really understood how the pricing got to be individual speakers, and then you have to multiply it by two to understand what it cost. And so you'll find everything's clearly marked. We work from, again, the $150 speaker by Sonos. It's kind of a streamer. We work for just notch up there from Blue Sound. We carry Monitor Audio. We carry Magnapan. We carry Vandersteen is really one of our big staples. I actually own a pair personally in my home. You end up finding there is amplification from DCS or I'm sorry, Audio Research, Dan D'Agostino, which actually was formerly Krell, and now is a completely new company with new designs. And quite honestly, it's beautiful gear.
It is literally beautiful gear. Right. I mean, it's like a work of art. To a large extent, there are pieces in your store which, much like automobiles, and some of our listeners out there know that I am an advertising marketing guy, a media guy, and I remember putting together a layout for Motor Cars of Georgia that highlighted a Lamborghini, and the headline I created was "Performance Art." And that would apply to some of the pieces that
Without
you
a
carry.
doubt.
Performance art. And tell us more. You have preamplifiers, amplifiers. We mentioned turntables, an array of speakers. Where have tape decks gone? Is there a category for storage hardware? What's happened in that area?
Well, I want to go back to the art thing.
Yes,
for
back.
one, yes, a lot of these manufacturers are absolutely producing works of art. And what's really neat about it is that it's, you take a work of art and it's actually playing works of art. So, I mean, these songs and these kind of things and, operas or whatever that it's playing are actual works of art in their own. And there's so much passion all the way through the industry by everybody that's in it. And that's kind of what raises the level of everything in this industry is the passion. So, in getting back to your tape deck thing, tape is kind of a weird thing today. It's we do, from what I hear, cassettes are kind of coming back. I don't know how far they could actually come back. Reel-to-reels are at a very, very high end today. So if you're willing to get a reel-to-reel at $20,000 or $30,000 and willing to pay for some of the very limited amount of tape that's out there, because there are people that are going back to the master tape machines and then getting duplicates of those things made, and you may spend $100, $200, $400, $500 for one album. Okay, so you end up finding that is kind of a higher level today, and but you end up finding streaming from CD level on up is extraordinarily good if done by the right company and orchestrated. I mean, really by us, one of the things that we're great at is helping you match up gear and getting the most value for your money.
We're going to take a break. When we come back, I'm going to ask you a little more about tape and vinyl. We're here with Alan Jones of Hifi Buys. We've been talking about high-end and not necessarily strictly high-end because, as he pointed out, you can come and get a basic quality set of speakers that aren't the price of an automobile, but he does carry some speakers that are the price of an automobile. And we'll be back to talk with Alan some more right after this break.
45 years of experience is behind the most trusted name in auto transportation. Passport Transport, the first and finest today. That's why Passport Transport is the preferred auto transport for major auto manufacturers, concours, museums, tours, and collectors, and should be your choice from across the state to across the country. When you have the need, go to PassportTransport.com and enjoy the peace of mind referenced experience will give you. Passport Transport.
Perhaps you are struggling to cope with the disease of addiction. If not, you probably know a family member or friend that needs help in battling the cravings and the personal and professional damage done by the effects of drugs or alcohol. Get a pen and paper and be ready to write down the following. These are the issues that the trained staff at the Atlanta Healing Center address and treat every day. Their doctors and counselors with over 40 years of practice in the field of addiction can treat the suffering individual in a thoughtful, compassionate, and experienced manner and guide him or her along the path to recovery. So call 770-696-9862 and speak to a knowledgeable staff member about how you or your loved one can be helped to enjoy a better and healthier life. More information is also available on the website at www.atlantahealingcenter.com.
Hi, I'm Dr. Mike Karuchak. Join me and my co-host, Dr. Hal Schertz, every Thursday morning at 8 a.m. and listen to the Doctor's Lounge, where you get a private insight into the conversations that doctors have amongst themselves. Join us Thursday, 8 a.m. every week.
You're listening to America's Web Radio on the AmericasBroadcastNetwork.com. Thank you for listening.
Welcome back to the Business Hour. I'm Ron Comacho, your host. And we're here with Alan Jones, the owner of Hifi Buys, a high-fidelity sound with some visual hardware and systems. And we'll talk about that in a moment. We'll talk about home entertainment and media centers. But before the break, we were talking about vinyl, and we're talking about tape and how there's still the capability for high-quality sound from tape recorders. But vinyl is one of those areas that a lot of folks would have long since fallen by the wayside in terms of sound quality, and yet they've continued to improve. And you happen to have some turntables in the shop, which, in my opinion, they exemplify the performance art characterization because they're absolutely gorgeous. They're like pieces of small sculpture that happen to be electromechanical devices that enable you to get really great sound from a record. And tell us a little bit about some of those turntables and the passion, which is a reoccurring theme for today, because as laid back as you are, Alan, you're a pretty passionate guy about what you do, and your people are passionate about audio and visual. But tell us about those turntables. Tell us why vinyl has managed to survive. And then let's segue into some of the cartridges you have, which are the price of a small used car.
Yes, it can get there. You'll find vinyl is a bit nostalgic, and we're buying old cars and old furniture and doing all these things, and kind of liking to visit some of our past. I think it makes us feel warm and whole, and I think that's one of the great things for it. I will tell you, you take a 20-year-old turntable or a 40-year-old turntable, and you spend a couple $100 on it. You'll find if you spend $400 on a new turntable today, it will most likely, without a problem, sound much, much better. Technology has moved us forward. We have better bearings. We have better arm technologies. We have a better understanding. The physics has always kind of been the same. So you end up finding there's one of the companies we carry called Rega. We carry Project and Brinkman and that kind of thing, and Clear Audio as well, and even VPI. So we have a lot of really great turntables on display, anywhere from about $499 to a little over $30,000. And can you hear the difference between those? Absolutely. I tell everybody, I kind of tease it. I say your grandmother could hear the difference between the two, because, we think that, we're limited by this or by that or whatever. And in reality, there is a lot more difference between this gear. And the problem is that I think, and I know when I was younger and before I really knew what I know today, I did not think there was as much difference between it, because I never found a place that could actually show me that. It always seemed like there was something else at hand and what they were trying to teach me or whatever. And all I wanted to do was how do I get more fidelity? How do I get a better sound? And sometimes we walk into a thing and we say, well, I want my sound to sound like this. Well, that's great. But the only problem with that whole thought is that when you make everything sound like you want it to sound, you are now the master of every record. So now you're taking yourself away from what is the truth and into what exactly how you want it. Well, I'm okay with that. And I think people having their preferences is a wonderful thing. So don't take my statement here as, as taking away from that. But at the same time, if we want to hear what the artist put out, which is really what we're there to do, then you end up finding that we want to make sure that we try and keep ourselves so much out of it. And that's where, quite honestly, the expertise of a store, you look at turntables, that takes expertise. You look at putting a good system together, that takes expertise. You look at getting fidelity in a home, that takes expertise. To make it work the way you want it to and to make it easy, that takes expertise. It's not something that is just, it just happens. Let's buy this brand, that brand, this brand, whatever, and it just happens. And that's one of the things that I guess I think if I could teach someone in an instant what is the difference between it, that would be the one thing I would love to be able to do. But that takes time, and unfortunately, we're sometimes pressed for time and are not willing to invest that time in our own lives, which to me doesn't make sense.
I was making the analogy earlier about, yes, we don't take time. I mean, which is also a sub-theme for today, is taking the time to appreciate the music, the art, feel the passion, hear the passion. We were talking about vinyl, and I just have always been amazed that a piece of vinyl with those little grooves has been around for so long and capable of sound reproduction. But one of the things you pointed out to me that I hadn't thought about before we went on the air was a lot of devices create a noise of their own. And so turntables, because they were electromechanical, the mechanical part would have sometimes translated into either a barely audible and an inaudible but still there, or a very audible sound. And when you talk about someone liking a particular sound, maybe you grew accustomed to the characteristics of your turntable that had these inherent sounds. And today, the equipment, both preamps, amplifiers, have all, you pointed out to me, had noise reduction systems. Or maybe more on the speaker side. Tell us about that, about how noise is being better and better filtered out.
Well, it's there's several different ways that happens. When you look at a turntable, and I'm just going to take that for example, and then we'll kind of move into some of the other stuff. But everything that happens in a turntable is magnified like it's under an electron microscope. And if you actually search on Google, and I invite everybody to do that right now, is go out there and look at Google and then search electron microscope needle in a groove. And you'll see it playing about an inch of a record and a needle in a groove. The guy had to remove the magnets from the cartridge because it was messing up the microscope. But it gives you an idea of what is going on in that groove. And when you look at that and you go, oh my gosh, how in the world does that actually make sound the way it does? It's mind-boggling. Okay. And digital, if you actually knew how digital worked, it'd blow your mind. It's like it shouldn't work, but it does. And people figure these things out. And so one of the things that ends up happening. So when you take every 3 dB is a doubling of the sound. Okay. So you end up finding cartridge needles require 40 dB to 60 to 65 dB of gain. Okay, meaning they have to multiply. So if you take the amount of output that the cartridge has, you have to do 3 dB is a doubling of that, then 6 dB is a doubling of that, and it's an exponential scale. So when you think everything that happens in that turntable, every little bearing, every arm material, the thing that it sits on, the noise in the room, the background noise, the signal noise ratio can be created by trucks driving by or a train or your air conditioner on or all those things. And all that stuff can actually hide detail, because it's all being magnified. If the turntable can see it in any way, form, or shape, or feel it, then it will actually pick that up and be multiplied by that 40 to 65 dB of gain that is required. I hope that everybody followed that.
Well, I think if they didn't follow it in exact detail or the physics of that, they followed the basic concept.
Okay,
which
good.
is like extraneous sources of sound being reproduced.
Mm-hmm. So we talked more about noise and amplifiers and preamplifiers, and I'll get to speakers in just a minute, but it is not using noise reduction systems that make that happen. The real advent in digital today, which is done by DCS with the ring DAC, is to basically avoid having noise in the first place. If you end up having an amplifier circuit, you build what they call a fully balanced or differential amplifier. And that actually builds pretty much 2 complete left channels and 2 complete right channels in a system. We know that all circuits make noise, but no 2 circuits make the same noise. So if we build 2 left channels and we compare them at the end and only keep what is the same, then what we have left is pure signal, not noise that's made by the piece of electronics that it's going through. So it allows us to reduce that noise. If anybody ever wants to know how amazing just a single sound is and the complexity of just, the clap of my hand or one little sound in my voice or the tap of a, tambourine or a cymbal, the complexity of that is it's thousands and thousands of sounds that make up that one unique note. And when you think of that complexity, there's so many little overtones and things that are so tiny and small that help make that sound specifically like it and another sound specifically like it, that when we get to that point and we have noise that is actually in the system, we actually cover up that detail, and therefore we lose its harmonics, its richness, what makes it unique, what makes it comfortable to the brain. So the more of that we keep intact and the less noise we have, the more relaxing to a degree that sound will be to the brain. And so there is a lot of stuff that is out there about, how our brain absorbs things, and there's time and phase coherence. And now there's kind of a new format called MQA that deals with that same kind of timing era or time smearing and so on. And so we're seeing the world kind of start to get towards the smaller part of correcting a lot of these things that are noise and noise smearing, which again is taking fidelity away from us.
And after all, today's focus is on fidelity and high resolution, accurate reproduction of sound. I think that there used to be a lot more emphasis on frequency response, like the human ear has this range and these devices are able to reproduce sound that can capture the low end, the high end, the mid range. But we know there's so many more characteristics to sound, as you just pointed out.
Yes.
And I think that that's what the technology is getting better at reproducing. And even though we couldn't put our finger on it, which we're getting better and better at, we can hear it. Just like trying to describe the subtleties of taste, which we have done or at least attempted to do, but it's not until you actually taste something and you realize that it's got a complexity. And
there's grapes in all the bottles.
That's right. There's grapes, generally, hopefully,
Yes.
in all the bottles. When we're going to be taking a break here in a little bit, but when we come back, I want you to talk about why we might get a preamplifier and an amplifier, why separates, a little bit about why separates, and then a little bit about what considerations would go into someone who's thinking of a home entertainment center. They've only had a big screen, but the sound wasn't particularly good, and now they want to beef that up. We're here with Alan Jones of Hifi Buys, based here in Atlanta, Georgia. It's a very high-end audio products and systems, along with visual products and systems, and we'll be back to talk with Alan more about that range right after this break.
Quick Stakes, that's Q-U-I-K Stakes, are not just for surveyors. They are great for family and community gardens. Go online to www.quickstake.com or contact your local land surveying supply dealer and get you a box of Quick Stakes. You'll love them every year when you plant your garden. Again, that's Quick Stakes, Q-U-I-K Stakes, the truly preferred way to stake and identify what's in your garden now.
The Docs for Patient Care Foundation is your way to join the fight and become a member of an organization created by doctors for patients dedicated to fighting for your healthcare freedom and preserving the doctor-patient relationship. Get a pen and paper. Write down www.docsforpatientcarefoundation.org. That's www.docsforpatientcarefoundation.org. Go to our site and please make a generous tax-deductible donation and join the fight today. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Dr. Mike Karuchak. Join me and my co-host, Dr. Hal Schertz, as we talk about the topics that doctors talk about amongst themselves, such as Medicare, Obamacare, alternative forms of care, and health information technology. Join us every Thursday morning, 8 to 9 a.m.
You're listening to America's Web Radio on the AmericasBroadcastNetwork.com. Thank you for listening.
Welcome back to the Business Hour. We're here with Alan Jones, the owner of Hifi Buys, a high-end audio and visual shop here in Atlanta. We've been talking about hardware and systems and sound and high fidelity and how equipment has evolved to reveal more and more of the sound that previously was not audible, and that just before the break we were talking about how you're able to hear more because of the quality of reproduction and how there are so many ways to get to quality reproduction. I said before, just before the break as well, that I wanted to ask you about separates. You know, for example, why does anyone want to buy a preamplifier and an amplifier when in fact receivers, which have taken on a whole new connotation, there aren't that many receivers, or I guess there's a few where you have a built-in tuner for AM, FM, and the preamp and amp are in one box. So tell us why we might want to buy a preamp and amp separately.
Let me just start off so that everybody kind of follows a receiver. Basically, we're used to it. It has a tuner and a preamp and amp built into it. So if you take the tuner out, that becomes an integrated amp. If you then take the preamp out of that, you then have a power amplifier, which is simply a multiplier of the signal. And the preamp is the thing with the volume control on it and the little selector switch that says what I want to listen to. So you, in a receiver, you have a tuner, a preamp, and an amplifier. So today, you know,
have they gotten better, appreciably better?
Everything has gotten appreciably better.
Okay, so today's Sony receiver is light years ahead, or at least more advanced than 10, 20, 30 years ago.
Yes, but let me add some caveats.
Okay.
I fortunately work in a business where I get to talk out of both sides of my mouth all day long. But Alan, what do you think of this versus that? So that's what I end up getting. But so let's take back in the 70s, nobody in this industry was building what I call junk in a box, meaning products that are just specifications on a box. They don't sound very good. The specifications are pretty much a big time stretch. You'll see all this stuff out there for $300-400. It says it's 100 watts a channel, and it couldn't in its wildest dreams produce 100 watts per channel. So they're really 15-watt amplifiers that they use a test tone at 1 kilohertz, which is like nothing you'd ever actually hear through the amplifier. But and so they'll take that for 1 little nanosecond and say, oh, since it can do it, it's 100 watts. So then we look at that with a specification of, THD or whatever. The thing is, the specs really don't mean much. That's why you really need to go and listen to stuff to really determine what it sounds like. If you take an amplifier and it says it's 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz plus or minus so many dB, or even a speaker, it still doesn't say anything about what it sounds like. So we have to, and that's part of the reason I tell folks, go out and get some expertise, whether it's me or anyone else. Use the expertise that's around you. I have learned through my life that it actually saves me money in the long run, because I wind up not doing things a second time and a third time and a fourth time, because and the thing is really being able to find people with expertise that really want to take you someplace. That's part of the reason our tagline is, again, get the experience. We want you to come in and have a wonderful experience. We want you to be able to take the experience that we have home with you, and then at the same time for you to be able to have a great experience for yourself, for your family, your friends, and that kind of thing is home as well. And I know I'm way off topic. My apologies.
No, it's all related. It's all related. I think you're doing great. I wanted to ask you, THD, total harmonic distortion. Is that still a useful spec?
It has never been a useful spec. But I'll explain to people what it is so that they get that it's.
I know it was always an over-leveraged spec. Yeah.
Total harmonic distortion, where that is, and you can make any amplifier manufacturer can make that spec anything they want to. So it determines where they are in the wattage scale. So let's say an amplifier is really capable of 100 watts, and then at about 105 watts, it starts to distort and break down. Okay. So what that means is that the rated output power, that is where that amplifier is starting to break down. Meaning when I get, let's say it's rated at 100 watts per channel and it says 100 watts per channel with THD at 0.005. Well, if they actually turn it to 102 watts, it's probably 0.5. Okay. So, and if they went down to 90 watts, it'd be 0.0005. So we can make THD, and it's amazing how many people I have seen in my life, because, you know, I have a lot of people that will walk in and they're sure that we're going to not do something right by them. So they're fully in charge, which is fine with me, but not helpful to them. And you end up finding that, you know, they'll buy by total harmonic distortion specs, and that is a manufacturer that is playing on that person. Simple as that.
A lot of subjectivity
Yes.
there. Okay, now we're starting to come into the home stretch here, Ellen, and I definitely don't want to forget a couple of different areas to touch on. And one that we'll get to in just a bit is to have you tell us all about the really wonderful work that Hifi Buys does in support of a Just Fire. We'll get to that.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to now go back, because you told me a little bit about this, a great story. There's an aha moment in the lives of not all, many professionals. I told the story about the attorney that we had on the program who was sitting in the living room at age 4. His mom was watching Perry Mason. He turned to the TV and he said, "Mom, that's what I want to do." And she said, "What? Be on TV?" And he said, "No, do what that guy's doing." And she said, "What? Be an attorney?" "No, that guy in that courtroom." And he wanted to be a litigator. He didn't know that term, but he is a guy who is a litigator and never strayed from that from age 4. And that's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Most of us stray from any path we would have envisioned many times. Or we had a veterinarian who watched a small animal get a pet dog get killed by a tractor on the farm, and the seeds were planted for him to become a veterinarian.
Wow.
You were, I don't know if you were walking down the street and you said, "Hey, there's an audio store and I'm going to go in and check them out," in Arizona?
I lived in Casa Grande, Arizona. And shall we say, I actually was in the automobile business at that time, which I'm thankful I'm out of. At that time, the automobile business was very different than it is today. But I walked into an audio store, and I will tell you, every single person in this industry, and I know if there's other industry folks that are out there listening to this, every single person that's in this industry is passionate about it because of one moment, one day, that they listened to something that just became a memory in their head and emotionally just involved in it. I know that happened to me, and it happened to me at a place called the Satellite Center in Casa Grande, Arizona. I remember the song. I remember the gear. I worked for that store 2 days later, and basically from that point on, my life was pretty well written. I had no idea I would wind up in Atlanta, Georgia as the owner of Hifi Buys, but I knew generally that this was a very passionate thing. The one thing that I love about passion is that it creates learning. And there is no substitute for learning in life. And the biggest thing that you want to, and I tell everybody, if you can find anything you're passionate about, or find people that are passionate about things, there is no doubt that you will be able to learn and learn and learn from those people, because passion brings about natural learning. You do it without working at it. It's not something that you try to do or you direct yourself to do. It just happens because you're passionate about it.
And speaking of passion, at the original source, where you have musicians creating music,
same thing.
It is the reproduction of that passion, so to speak. What were you listening to that day in Casa Grande? Because I think that plays a role.
It was Steve Winwood back in the High Life. And everybody has their own song. I think it's one of the greatest social media things that I've ever seen out there was, what was that first time you listened to a song and it really got you? And seeing the responses to everybody is all the way across the map. So there's not one in particular song. There's not one thing. There's not a recording technique. There's not digital or tube or solid state or anything. Whether you were streaming it, whether it was compressed or uncompressed or Bluetooth or whatever, it's what captured that person because that was just something that they went, wow.
And it
changed their life.
It just happens that, we share this appreciation for Steve Winwood, that piece of music is probably played many times in many an audio boutique because it's such a fantastic piece to reproduce and to listen to the subtleties.
Well, we're in the store. We want to play things that people know.
That's right. You want to evoke some degree, even if it's only recent nostalgia, right? I mean, from a week ago.
If I sit there and play something that they've never heard of, and it's some strange piece of wild audiophile music, I'm really doing a disservice to them in my store. I'm not giving them an experience. I am giving them an experience, but not one they're enjoying.
Okay, so now I want to switch to something
Yes.
that is also near and dear to you, and something that you do that is a really good, a good project to be supportive of. Tell us about Adjust Fire.
Okay, actually, it is Alchemy Sky that I'm a board member for, and Adjust Fire was an event that we had at the store that I'm back up just a little bit. Alchemy Sky, actually, what we do is we actually do music therapy for veterans and a lot of other music therapy around it as well. One of my big passions with it is really music therapy for the folks with PTSD. A while back in my life, had panic attacks and that kind of thing, which is nothing like what they're going through. So it makes me look at what they're going through as something in such degrees greater. And I know what music does for me. And I know what music does for others. I've seen it for 35 years. So for me to have any thought that music would not help this is ridiculous. I am absolutely 100% sure that music moves these people. It takes them places. They are the people that have served our country. For us not to do things for them and to try and do it in ways that are actually effective to them. Not just, I think, I always say thanks for the service from a veteran or anything along that lines, our policemen, our firemen, all of that kind of thing, because all these people serve us. And I don't think there's not enough gratitude ever that goes out for them. But Adjust Fire was a song that was written by a group of, I think it's 11 veterans. And what they did is we got them together in a studio with some guidance, and everybody that was there got to write part of the song and also got to sing in the song. And then we did the song launch of Adjust Fire at Hifi Buys. And Jay Budd, who heads up Alchemy Sky, I can't give him enough credit, that and the rest of the board. It is amazing to see. They did a video of, and I invite y'all to go out to YouTube and look for Adjust Fire, Alchemy Sky, that kind of thing. And you will find that there's a video out there of the song. It's also on all the streaming platforms. As a matter of fact, MQA was able to get it on Tidal in MQA in 24 hours, which almost never happens. And I thank Ken Forsyth for that. But you will find that there's just so much passion around that, and seeing that this song actually had an effect on their lives, and the fact that it had effect on their lives together. Here's folks that have all gone through a lot of the similar things, feeling the same way, and they got together and expressed their feelings and put it out there. I was so proud of it. I've still got chills in my arms just thinking about it right now.
How could that not help them out in some way? And I want to say, Alan, thank you for that valuable support of that project. And I want to thank you also for the valuable work that you do in the name of quality, high fidelity. I think that it will never go out of style. Thank you so much for being a guest today.
Thank you very much for having me. I love being here.
You've been listening to the Business Hour here at America's Web Radio. We're on Fridays from 10 to 11 a.m. We'll see you on the internet and on the radio next week. Have a great weekend.
You're listening to America's Web Radio on the AmericasBroadcastNetwork.com. Thank you for listening.
The disease of addiction is a life